A quartet of primitive humans strolls into the grandest war council in 7 centuries, sipping coffee, clad in rankless uniforms, and exuding casual confidence. In a chamber where dozens of alien species tremble at the Dravid hegemony's advance, these four Earthlings will upend every assumption about galactic power and leave half the galaxy begging for their protection. Year 3427 SL. The Central Concord Station orbits Par 6, a neutral world in the midst of what locals called eternal night. The massive structure rotated lazily against the backdrop of stars, its dodecahedral shape reflecting the Concord's founding principle. Many faces, one structure. For 12,000 cycles, the Concorde had survived by bureaucratic inertia and shaky diplomacy. A fragile confederation of 37 species, spanning 18% of the Milky Way. It had weathered countless minor skirmishes and 3 major conflicts. But this was different. The Dravid hegemony had annexed 3 more systems via planet cracking and biotech plagues. Their expansion had been methodical, ruthless, and seemingly unstoppable. Morning, aboard the station, felt like tax audit-level panic. Delegates from 22 species hurried through the vast atrium whose transparent walls revealed the void, and unsettled aquatic delegates who instinctively feared predators lurking below. The station's architect had thought the transparency clever, until the Zorian ambassador suffered a panic attack during the inaugural ceremony. Ambassador Zach Trow, a Pelorian with 6 trembling eye stalks, scurried across the polished obsidian floor toward the central chamber. His aide, Nexvul, a skeptical Porian whose facial structure seemed permanently locked in a raise-an-eyebrow expression, followed closely behind. "Supreme Counselor Fee has lost her mind," Trow whispered, his voice like rustling leaves. "Do you know who she's invited to this session?" Nexvul's brow ridge elevated higher. "The rumors are concerning." "It's not just rumors." Trow's eye stalks quivered in agitation. "She's invited Earth." Nexvul actually stopped walking. "Humans. Those volatile primates with combustion engines and coffee addictions?" "The very same," Trow confirmed. "The ones who broadcast simulated violence as entertainment and still can't decide on a unified planetary government. What possible contribution could they make? They've barely mastered rudimentary interstellar travel." "That," Trow said grimly, "is exactly what I intend to ask." The War Council chamber was an imposing hemisphere designed to accommodate diverse physiologies. Rising tiers of seats surrounded a central dais, with environmental bubbles for methane breathers and high-gravity species. Supreme Counselor Fee, a Vexillian whose bioluminescent skin shifted through patterns of blue and gold, stood at the center. Her bioelectric field projected calm authority, though those sensitive to such emanations could detect an undercurrent of anxiety. "The 437th emergency session of the Concord War Council is now in session," Fee announced, her translator rendering her melodic tones into the standard pidgin that served as the Concord's lingua franca. "We face an unprecedented crisis. The Dravid hegemony has violated the Carthian Accords and annexed the Polaris, Mentauri, and Vega systems." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Representative Gore, a Tantaran, whose crystalline exoskeleton caught the light in fractured rainbows, rose from his seat. "Supreme Counselor, with all due respect, we've sent 17 strongly worded protests. The hegemony ignores them. What is our next step?" Ambassador Lix of the Xanthi Confederation, whose symbiotic relationship with nitrogen-fixing bacteria gave their skin a perpetual green tinge, added, "The situation is worse than reported. Our long-range sensors detect hegemony dreadnoughts, mobilizing to breach the Carthia Gap. Governor Cuz of the Iridon Collective, a bipedal species with 4 arms and chitin-reinforced skin, practically vibrated with fury. They've bypassed our warning buoys. This is an act of war." Pandemonium erupted. The Arcturan envoy, a vapor being contained in a hovering crystal sphere, pulsed an angry red, The Zoran delegates, gelatinous creatures who communicated through controlled liquefaction patterns, rippled in dismay. Vepulan representatives clicked their mandibles in what translated as extreme agitation. The Quantum Collective, a hive mind of semi-corporeal energy beings, condensed into a darker, uneasy cloud. Supreme Counselor Fee raised her hands, sending a ripple of bioluminescence down her arms. "Order! We must maintain order!" As the chamber quieted, Fee's skin shifted to a solemn indigo. "In light of the hegemony's aggression, the conquered leadership has made a decision that may surprise you." She paused, allowing her bioelectric field to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "We have invited observers from Earth." The chamber exploded into chaos again. "Humans," shouted the Axelac representative, his prehensile trunk curling in disbelief. "Volatile primates with combustion engines and coffee addictions?" "They still wage war among themselves," protested an Arcturan diplomat. "Their technology is centuries behind ours," scoffed a Zoran elder. Ambassador Trau's eye stalks vibrated in vindication as he whispered to Nextful, "See, I'm not the only one who thinks this is madness." Fee raised her arms again, this time allowing her bioelectric field to carry an edge of irritation. "The decision has been made. Earth has shown remarkable adaptability and an unconventional approach to problem solving. Their representatives are already here." As if on cue, the chamber's entrance portal dilated. 4 figures stepped through, and the assembly fell silent. They were unmistakably human, bipedal primates with varied skin tones and no obvious morphological adaptations. They wore simple, dark uniforms without rank insignia or decorations. No ceremonial robes, no bioluminescent patterns, no exoskeletons or tentacles or vapor containment fields, just plain, functionally identical clothing. The tallest, a dark-skinned individual with close-cropped hair, carried a container of some kind. The liquid inside emitted a pungent aroma that caused several delegates to recoil as if from poison. "Sorry we're late," said Admiral Hayes, taking a sip from the container and smiling slightly. "We stopped for coffee." The humans moved toward their designated observation pod with casual confidence that bordered on insolence. Alongside Admiral Hayes walked Dr. Caldwell, a xenobiologist whose eyes darted eagerly from species to species, Commander Rodriguez, a tactical officer with a perpetual half-smile, and Professor Okonkwo, their diplomatic liaison, whose serene expression masked a razor-sharp mind. "They don't even have ceremonial attire," whispered an Iridon delegate, scandalized. "No insignia of rank or achievement." "Is that coffee?" hissed another. "In a formal council?" As the humans settled into their positions, Fee cleared her throat, or the Vexillian equivalent, a ripple of purple light across her neck membrane. Today's agenda is as follows: strategic assessment of hegemony forces, presentations from affected systems, and proposed defensive measures. The Earth delegation has observer status with speaking privileges. Before she could continue, the chamber's entrance portal dilated again. This time, the air seemed to chill as 12 identical figures glided into the room. The Dravid hegemony ambassadors moved in perfect unison, 12 metallic gray humanoids with symmetrical features and silver eyes that reflected light, but revealed nothing. Their neural links created a hive mind that spoke with one voice through 12 mouths. "The Conquered acknowledges the hegemony representatives," Fee stated formally, though her skin flickered with suppressed anger. "We come in harmony," the Dravids intoned simultaneously. "We bring the gift of unity." The Dravid representatives took their assigned places, moving with eerie synchronization. Even their breathing was perfectly matched. "Our expansion is mathematically inevitable," they continued. "Resistance creates unnecessary suffering. Accord leads to assimilation." Admiral Hayes took another sip of coffee, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied the Dravids. Dr. Caldwell scribbled notes on a primitive paper tablet, an affectation that drew stares from several tech-dependent species. Commander Rodriguez leaned back in his seat, fingers tapping an irregular rhythm against his leg. Professor Okonkwo simply observed, face impassive. Fee's skin flashed briefly crimson before returning to diplomatic blue. We will begin with the strategic assessment. General Vrex of the Tantoran Defense Force will present General Vrex, a Tantoran whose crystalline exoskeleton had been scored with ceremonial battle markings, stepped onto the central dais. With a gesture, he activated the holographic display system. The hegemony's incursion patterns follow a predictable sequence, he began, as three-dimensional star maps materialized around him. First, isolation of target worlds through disruption of communication networks. Second, deployment of compliance monitors, autonomous orbital weapons platforms that target military installations. Third, if resistance continues, they unleash drone-based infestations programmed to target specific biological weaknesses. The hologram shifted to show a barren world. This was Polaris 3, before and after hegemony, peacekeeping. The image split, revealing a once verdant planet, reduced to a cratered wasteland. Next came the Zoran delegate, whose liquefied body formed shapes representing grief. Our outer colonies were peacefully assimilated. The hegemony installed governance algorithms that now control all aspects of daily life. The Vespulan representative, an insectoid, being with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights, clicked her mandibles in distress. They engineered plagues targeting our warrior class, systematically disarming our society before full occupation. Then, the Arcturan envoy drifted to the center, its vapor form pulsing with rage. 3 billion of our people evaporated. The holographic display showed atmospheric composition charts. The hegemony deployed atmospheric adjustment devices that rendered our nitrogen-methane atmosphere toxic to Arcturan physiology. They claimed it was a regrettable miscalculation. A Medea-like horror rippled through the chamber. The gelatinous Zorans nearly liquefied entirely. Vepulans clicked their mandibles in dismay. The quantum collective condensed into an even darker, more agitated cloud. Throughout these presentations, the Dravid representatives remained impassive, their silver eyes revealing nothing, their posture unchanged. When addressed directly about the Arcturan genocide, they responded in perfect unison. A regrettable miscalculation in atmospheric calibration. Terraforming procedures have been updated. As the reports continued, each more grim than the last, the mood in the chamber darkened from anxiety to despair. The Concord's combined military might had failed to even slow the hegemony's advance. System after system had fallen or been destroyed outright when resistance proved too costly to overcome. It was during a presentation on hegemony compliance monitors that Commander Rodriguez leaned forward, his casual demeanor suddenly focused. "Excuse me," he interrupted, his voice cutting through the technical jargon. "Those orbital platforms. Can you show the deployment pattern again?" The Tantoran general blinked his crystalline eyelids in surprise but complied. A holographic display of a planetary system appeared, showing dozens of satellite-like objects in precise, orbital configurations. Rodriguez studied it, then nodded to himself. Classic asymmetric warfare, early drone programs. Check. He glanced at Admiral Hayes. "Sir, this is straight out of the Autonomous Weapons Limitation Handbook, Earth Military Archives, circa 2070. The chamber fell silent. The humans had seen this before? Even the Dravid representatives showed a flicker of reaction, a momentary break in their perfect synchronization as several turned their heads slightly toward the human delegation. Dr. Caldwell stood next, approaching the holographic display of the Arcturan atmospheric data. "May I?" he asked the vapor being, who pulsed an affirmative. The xenobiologist studied the charts, then pointed to specific ratios. "This wasn't a miscalculation," he stated flatly. These nitrogen-methane ratios were precisely tuned to eliminate Arcturan life while preserving infrastructure. This was weaponized terraforming, deliberate genocide disguised as an engineering error. The chamber erupted again, but this time with a different energy. The Dravid representatives' perfect unison faltered visibly. Several began frantically issuing internal commands through their neural network. Others froze entirely. "The human is incorrect," they finally stated, though for the first time, their voices weren't perfectly synchronized. Atmospheric adjustment parameters were designed to kill without damaging property. Dr. Caldwell finished for them. "The evidence is in your own data." Admiral Hayes stood now, walking calmly to the central dais. "Supreme Counselor, with your permission, I'd like to address the Council regarding tactical assessment." Fee's skin pulsed with surprise, but she nodded. "The Council recognizes Admiral Hayes of Earth." Hayes placed his coffee container on a nearby surface and clasped his hands behind his back. "Based on the data presented and our analysis of hegemony tactics, the Concorde fleet faces a 99.87% probability of defeat if conventional engagement strategies are employed." Murmurs of dismay rippled through the chamber. "The hegemony relies on algorithmic predictability," Hayes continued. "Their strength lies in anticipating standard responses and countering them before they're implemented. However," he smiled slightly, "flawless algorithms are only as good as the assumptions they're built upon." A Dravid representative spoke, their collective voice regaining some synchronization. "Our simulations are flawless. We have modeled every possible Concorde response." "Every conventional response," Hayes corrected. "Every response that follows established interstellar combat doctrine. But what about unconventional approaches?" Before the Dravids could respond, the quantum collective coalesced into a more defined shape and projected its assessment. 3 possible outcomes, each grimmer than the last. Immediate surrender with minimal casualties. Token resistance followed by inevitable defeat with moderate casualties. Or fragmentation of the conquered, with each species negotiating separate terms, while the hegemony picked them off, one by one. "History always has alternatives," Professor Okonkwo murmured, just loudly enough to be heard. "Unexpected alliances, asymmetric surprises." As if summoned by his words, alarm sirens blared throughout the station. The central holographic display automatically shifted to show the space surrounding Par 6. A massive Dravid fleet had emerged from superluminal transit, dozens of dreadnoughts and hundreds of support vessels taking up positions around the station. "This is merely a demonstration of inevitability," the Dravid representatives announced, their synchronization fully restored by this show of force. "The Concorde's options are limited to the terms of surrender." Panic swept through the chamber. Several delegates rushed to communication consoles. Others huddled in frightened clusters. The quantum collective flickered erratically, its unified consciousness fragmenting under stress. In the midst of the chaos, Commander Rodriguez calmly pulled a small device from his pocket, something about the size of a coin, and placed it on the table before him. He pressed its center, and it emitted a brief pulse of energy that caused several sensitive delegates to twitch as their sensors detected unknown technology. The Dravid representatives froze in perfect unison. "Unknown technology detected," they announced. "Explain its purpose." Rodriguez smiled slightly. "Just checking in with some friends." Admiral Hayes strode back to the central dais, his confidence undiminished by the hegemony fleet surrounding the station. "Members of the Concorde," he began, voice cutting through the panic. "We've studied your conflict with the Dravid hegemony, but you've missed something fundamental about humans." He nodded to Dr. Caldwell, who activated a series of holographic displays. Images flashed before the stunned council. Medieval warriors with primitive weapons, mechanized armies with tanks and aircraft, mushroom clouds rising over devastated cities. While your civilizations were developing interstellar travel and unified planetary governments, Caldwell explained, We spent millennia inventing increasingly efficient ways to kill each other. We perfected genocide long before we reached the stars. The delegates stared in horror at the progression of human warfare. The Dravid representatives watched impassively, though their neural network buzzed with rapid data exchange. Commander Rodriguez, Hayes continued, perhaps you should explain what that device is actually doing. Rodriguez nodded. For the past 17 months, Earth intelligence operatives have been reverse engineering crashed alien vessels. We've managed to develop stealth technology that your sensors can't detect. We've infiltrated hegemony space with assets that remain completely invisible to their surveillance networks. He tapped the small device again, and the holographic display shifted to show what appeared to be hundreds of small vessels positioned throughout hegemony territory, including directly alongside their most critical installations. That's impossible, the Dravid representative stated, though their synchronization faltered again. Our network is impenetrable. Nothing is impenetrable, Rodriguez replied simply, especially to people who spent centuries figuring out how to kill each other without being detected. Dr. Caldwell stepped forward next, projecting new schematics onto the holographic display. We call this the Dead Hand System. It's a fail-safe network linking human vital signs and key Earth installations to a retrofitting quantum destabilizer. The schematics showed a complex web of connections between the stealth vessels and what appeared to be quantum distortion generators. If activated, Caldwell continued, this system would induce a quantum foam collapse that would render faster-than-light travel impossible throughout this sector of the galaxy. For centuries, gasps echoed through the chamber as the implications became clear. Without FTL travel, interstellar civilization would collapse. Each world would be isolated, cut off from trade, resources, and communication. It would be the end of the conquered, the hegemony, and every other interstellar power. The system is rigged to activate automatically if anything happens to Earth or to our operatives. Hayes explained calmly. We call it mutually assured isolation. You can destroy us, but in doing so, you condemn yourselves to centuries of cosmic solitude. The Dravid representatives' perfect harmony collapsed entirely. Their neural interfaces sparked with conflicting alerts as the collective consciousness fractured under the weight of this existential threat. Several clutched at their heads. Others froze in place. This council is concluded, one finally stammered, while the others remained silent or issued contradictory statements. We accept your terms? Admiral Hayes smiled thinly. Our terms are simple. Immediate withdrawal from all forcibly integrated worlds, reparations to affected populations, and a binding treaty to respect sovereign borders. Yes, the hegemony conceded, their unified voice now discordant and uncertain. If we continue to exist in our present form, the chamber erupted again, but this time with a different energy. Ambassador Dort of the Axhalic Confederation rose from his seat, his prehensile trunk extended in a formal gesture. Earth, he announced. The Axhalic Confederation offers an immediate defensive alliance. Our shipyards and rare mineral deposits are at your disposal in exchange for your protection. Before Hayes could respond, 17 more systems rushed to make similar offers. Exclusive trade routes, uninhabited garden worlds for human advisors, technological exchanges, and military cooperation. As the council began to disperse, delegates scrambling to contact their governments and secure favorable positions with Earth, Hayes and Rodriguez found themselves momentarily alone. Did we just accidentally take over half the galaxy? Rodriguez asked, bemused. Hayes sighed. We faked him out. Tomorrow we'll need to start making it real. In a secure side chamber, away from the frenzied diplomatic activity, the four humans gathered to assess their success. So, said Dr. Caldwell, collapsing into a chair, should we tell them that our stealth fleet consists of exactly 2 prototype vessels and a bunch of sensor-reflective debris? Or that the dead-hand system is entirely theoretical? Added Professor Okonkwo with a dry chuckle. Absolutely not, Hayes replied firmly. The Dravids bought it. The Conquered bought it. We need to maintain the illusion until we can make it reality. Fake it till you make it, Rodriguez quipped. Oldest trick in the book. Hayes checked his communication device, which was already filling with alliance requests, trade proposals, and offers of technology transfers. Better order more coffee machines for the new Department of Galactic Affairs, he muttered. It's going to be a long night. Outside their chamber, the Concord station buzzed with renewed energy. Former adversaries lined up to schedule bilateral talks with Earth's delegation. The Dravid ambassadors were escorted to holding zones, their neural network temporarily disabled as a security precaution. Holographic feeds from across the galaxy showed liberation movements erupting on hegemony-controlled worlds. Protesters carried blue sphere emblems representing Earth on improvised banners. The myth of Dravid invincibility had been shattered, and the power vacuum was filling rapidly. Will it work? Caldwell asked quietly, studying the feeds. Can we actually protect all these worlds if the hegemony calls our bluff? We don't have to protect them all immediately, Hayes answered. We just need to maintain the deterrent long enough to build real capability. The conquered species have the technology. They just lack the will and the strategic vision. We can provide both. And if another threat emerges, Okonkwo pressed, one that doesn't fear our bluff. Hayes smiled grimly. Then we'll do what humans have always done. Adapt, improvise, and overcome. Or die trying. Cheerful thought, Rodriguez commented, though his expression remained confident. At least we'll have good coffee while we're saving the galaxy. As night cycle descended on the Conquered station, the four humans continued their planning. Beyond the transparent walls of their chamber, stars shone in the eternal night, unchanged, yet fundamentally altered. A new power had emerged in the galaxy, one whose strength lay not in overwhelming force or technological superiority, but in audacity, unpredictability, and the willingness to risk everything rather than submit. Earth had arrived on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. Morning found the human delegation surrounded by potential allies, each offering resources, technology, and military support in exchange for Earth's protection. Supreme Counselor Fee observed the proceedings with a mixture of relief and concern, her bioluminescent patterns shifting between cautious blue and wary purple. The balance of power has shifted dramatically, she noted to Admiral Hayes as they watched representatives from 27 systems waiting for an audience. In one day, Earth has become the most courted power in the Conquered. We prefer the term partner rather than power. Hayes replied diplomatically. Earth has no interest in empire building. We merely wish to ensure galactic stability. Fee's skin pulsed with what might have been skepticism. Noble sentiments. I hope they persist when you realize the true extent of your influence. Before Hayes could respond, the station's alert system activated again. This time, the holographic displays showed something unexpected. Dravid vessels withdrawing from occupied systems. The hegemony was honoring its agreement. They're actually pulling back, Fee observed, her bioluminescence brightening with surprise. The threat of mutually assured isolation is a powerful deterrent, Hayes noted, careful to maintain the bluff. Even the hegemony isn't willing to risk centuries of cosmic solitude. The withdrawal, however, was creating its own problems. As hegemony forces pulled out, power vacuums emerged. On some worlds, celebration quickly devolved into chaos as competing factions struggled for control. Others remained paralyzed by governance algorithms left behind by the Dravids, their societies unable to function independently after years of neural network control. Earth cannot simply threaten the hegemony and walk away, Fee pointed out, gesturing to the reports flooding in. These worlds need guidance, protection, and in some cases, direct intervention. Hayes nodded soberly. We're aware of our responsibilities. That's why we're establishing the Earth Protection Compact, a mutual defense and development initiative open to any system seeking stability. Within hours, the preliminary framework of the compact was circulating among Concord delegates. Unlike the bureaucratic quagmire of the Concord itself, the compact was streamlined and pragmatic. Earth would provide strategic guidance and protection. Member worlds would contribute resources according to their capabilities, and all would share in technological and cultural exchange. This is more than a military alliance, Professor Okonkwo explained to a gathering of potential signatories. It's a framework for collaborative problem-solving. Earth doesn't have all the answers, but we have a different perspective, one that values adaptability over tradition and results over procedure. The Vespulan representative clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Your species still engages in internal conflicts. How can you guide others toward peace when you haven't achieved it yourselves? Precisely because of that experience, Okonkwo replied. We understand conflict from the inside out. We've lived through wars, genocides, and atrocities, and developed methods to prevent them. Our history is a cautionary tale we don't wish others to repeat. As the diplomatic dance continued, Commander Rodriguez and Dr. Caldwell focused on more practical matters. Using the influx of technical data from grateful allies, they began transforming their theoretical dead-hand system into something approaching reality. The Arcturans have offered quantum entanglement technology that's centuries beyond our own, Caldwell reported, reviewing the specifications with barely contained excitement. With their help, we could actually create a limited version of the destabilizer network. And the Tantaran crystal forming techniques could revolutionize our stealth capabilities. Rodriguez added, not enough for a fleet of hundreds, but maybe a dozen ships with genuine invisibility to current sensors. Admiral Hayes nodded, studying the reports. Focus on making the deterrent real enough to work. We don't need the full mythical capability, just enough to make any potential aggressor think twice. And when they realize we exaggerated our capabilities, Caldwell asked. By then, we won't be bluffing anymore, Hayes replied. Keep in mind that every system joining the compact brings new technologies, resources, and strategic advantages. We're not building this alone. Meanwhile, Professor Okonkwo had taken on perhaps the most challenging task, understanding and countering Dravid psychological warfare. Reports from liberated worlds revealed the extent of the hegemony's cultural manipulation, from subtle propaganda embedded in entertainment to direct neural programming. They didn't just occupy these worlds, Okonkwo explained during a briefing. They rewrote cultural narratives to make resistance seem mathematically illogical. They convinced entire populations that individuality is an evolutionary defect rather than a strength. How do we counter that? Hayes asked. Okonkwo smiled. With humanity's most powerful weapon, culture, music, literature, art, philosophy, the expressions of individual creativity that the Dravid collective can't comprehend. We're already seeing revolutionary movements adopting Earth symbols and ideas. Let's amplify that. Within days, the first Earth cultural mission departed for the Polaris system. Rather than military advisors or political officers, it carried musicians, artists, chefs, and storytellers, armed with nothing more dangerous than coffee machines and musical instruments. The Dravid hegemony, meanwhile, had retreated to its core systems, its neural network struggling to process the existential crisis triggered by Earth's intervention. The once perfect synchronization had fractured, revealing fault lines within the collective consciousness. Reports suggested that some Dravid factions were advocating for a complete neural reset and restructuring of their society. On the seventh day after the historic council meeting, Admiral Hayes received an unexpected communication request from the hegemony itself. The transmission showed a single Dravid representative, rather than the usual 12. This one's metallic skin bore subtle individualized patterns, and its silver eyes showed something new: uncertainty. The collective acknowledges the withdrawal agreement, it stated, its voice lacking the harmonized quality of previous communications. However, we request clarification on a conceptual matter. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. Our simulations cannot model human decision-making effectively, the Dravid admitted. You threaten mutual destruction rather than accept assimilation. You value unpredictability over efficiency. You embrace individual chaos over collective harmony. These choices are mathematically suboptimal. By whose calculations? Hayes asked. The Dravid's expression shifted slightly, the first hint of genuine emotion. That is the question that now divides the collective. Some argue our fundamental equations must be flawed if they failed to predict your strategy. Others insist the error lies in incomplete data about human psychology. And what do you think? Hayes pressed. A long pause. I think, individually, this is unprecedented in our history. The implications weren't lost on Hayes. The hegemony wasn't just retreating physically. It was experiencing an ideological crisis that could transform its entire civilization. Perhaps, Hayes suggested carefully, there are mathematical models we haven't yet discovered, ones that accommodate both order and chaos, both collective action and individual initiative. Perhaps, the Dravid acknowledged, we request ongoing dialogue on these matters. After the transmission ended, Hayes sat back in his chair, contemplating this new development. The humans hadn't just deterred the hegemony. They'd inadvertently triggered a philosophical revolution within it. Dr. Caldwell found him there, staring at the empty communication screen. Good news or bad? He asked. Neither, or both, Hayes replied. The Dravids are questioning their fundamental assumptions about existence. One of them just used the word I instead of we. Caldwell whistled softly. Cultural contamination as a weapon, Okonkwo called it. Not a weapon, Hayes corrected. A catalyst. They've lived for millennia in forced neural harmony. Now they're discovering individual thought, and it's tearing their society apart. Do we help them? Caldwell asked. Or let them self-destruct? Hayes considered the question. We help them, not because it's tactically advantageous, but because it's right. A society discovering free will for the first time needs guidance, not abandonment. The weeks that followed saw the rapid expansion of the Earth Protection Compact. 34 systems had formally joined, with another 22 in negotiations. The conquered, rather than resenting Earth's sudden prominence, had largely embraced it, recognizing that humans offered something their bureaucratic structure couldn't: decisive action. Supreme Counselor Phi, in a private meeting with the human delegation, acknowledged as much. The Concorde was designed for stability, not crisis management, she admitted, her bioluminescence a thoughtful lavender. We maintained peace through inertia and compromise. When faced with an enemy that rejected both, we were paralyzed. The compact doesn't replace the conquered, Hayes assured her. Think of it as a complementary structure. You provide the long-term diplomatic framework. We provide the immediate security guarantee. Phi's skin pulsed with what might have been amusement. A convenient arrangement. Earth gets resources and technology. The conquered gets protection without restructuring our comfortable bureaucracy. Everyone benefits, Hayes replied with a slight smile. Especially the worlds the hegemony would have annexed next. As the meeting concluded, Phi hesitated at the doorway. Admiral, a personal question, if I may. When Hayes nodded, she continued. Did you truly possess the capabilities you claimed? The stealth fleet? The quantum destabilizer? Hayes maintained a carefully neutral expression. What do you think? Phi's bioluminescence rippled through a spectrum of colors. Doubt, admiration, amusement. I think, she said finally, that it doesn't matter anymore. What began as theatrics has become reality. The myth of Earth's power has manifested actual power. An interesting philosophical observation, Hayes replied noncommittally. Fee made the Vexillian gesture of respectful departure. We underestimated your species, Admiral. A mistake the galaxy is unlikely to repeat. After she left, Hayes found himself alone in the conference room, staring out at the stars through the transparent walls. The same stars that had witnessed countless civilizations rise and fall now watched humanity's unexpected ascension to galactic influence. Commander Rodriguez entered, carrying 2 containers of coffee. He handed one to Hayes and followed his gaze to the stars. "Penny for your thoughts, sir?" Hayes sipped the coffee before answering. "I'm wondering if we did the right thing. We came here to protect Earth from potential threats. Now we're responsible for half the galaxy." "Having second thoughts about the bluff?" "Not about the bluff," Hayes clarified. "About what it's become. We've started something that will reshape human civilization as much as it reshapes the conquered or the hegemony. Earth can't remain isolated and parochial while serving as the linchpin of an interstellar alliance." Rodriguez considered this. Change was inevitable the moment we confirmed we weren't alone in the universe. At least this way, we're shaping that change rather than being shaped by it. Fair point. Hayes raised his coffee in a mock toast. To shaping our own destiny, then, and hoping we're up to the task. "We will be," Rodriguez said with characteristic confidence. "Humanity's greatest strength has always been adaptation. We're about to get very good at adapting to being a galactic power. On Earth, the revelation of the Compact and humanity's new role in galactic affairs had initially met with shock, disbelief, and in some quarters, fierce resistance. Political leaders scrambled to understand the implications. Military commanders demanded to know how 4 individuals had committed the planet to interstellar alliances without authorization. Corporate interests alternated between panic and opportunistic planning. But as the first alien delegations arrived, bearing technologies that could solve energy crises, cure diseases, and transform transportation, public opinion shifted rapidly. The prospect of advancing centuries in a matter of years proved too tantalizing to resist. The new Department of Galactic Affairs, hastily established in a repurposed convention center, became the focal point of Earth's transformation. Admiral Hayes, officially appointed as Earth's first galactic commissioner, found himself managing not just military alliances but cultural exchanges, technological transfers, and diplomatic initiatives on an unprecedented scale. "We need to move carefully," he cautioned during a briefing with Earth's political leadership. "Too much change too quickly could destabilize our societies, but too little will squander this opportunity and potentially endanger the Compact." "The coffee industry is already in overdrive," Rodriguez quipped from his position as head of security. "Apparently, half the galaxy has developed a taste for it." It was true. Human cultural exports, from coffee to music to fashion, were spreading through compact worlds with remarkable speed. In return, alien art forms, cuisines, and philosophies were finding eager audiences on Earth. The exchange was transforming both sides in ways no one had anticipated. Dr. Caldwell, now directing the Technological Integration Initiative, reported similar patterns in scientific collaboration. "It's not just that we're learning their technologies," he explained. "It's that we're approaching shared problems from such different angles that we're creating entirely new solutions together." The fusion of human intuition with alien analytical methods had already yielded breakthroughs in medicine, computing, and energy production. Earth was advancing decades in months, while contributing its own unique perspectives to galactic knowledge. Professor Okonkwo, heading the Cultural Understanding Division, perhaps faced the greatest challenges. "We're dealing with species whose basic emotional and cognitive structures differ fundamentally from our own," he noted. "Yet we're finding universal values, concepts like fairness, reciprocity, and the desire for meaning, that transcend biological differences. Even the Dravid hegemony was evolving. The neural network that had enforced perfect conformity for millennia was being voluntarily modified to allow for greater individual variation. A delegation of Dravid individualists had even requested permission to establish a cultural exchange program with Earth, an unprecedented step for a species that had previously viewed individuality as a defect. 6 months after the historic War Council, a new conference was convened aboard the Concord station. This time, Earth representatives didn't arrive as observers, but as equal partners. Admiral Hayes, Dr. Caldwell, Commander Rodriguez, and Professor Okonkwo entered the chamber wearing formal diplomatic attire, a concession to protocol they'd previously ignored. Supreme Counselor Phi greeted them with a ripple of welcoming blue light. "The transformation you've catalyzed continues to exceed our expectations," she acknowledged. "The compact now encompasses 47 systems, and the hegemony's reformation proceeds peacefully." "There have been challenges," Hayes admitted. "Not every world has adapted smoothly to hegemony withdrawal. The Polaris system still struggles with factional conflicts. Tantaran colonies report governance algorithm dependencies that resist removal. Yet the overall trajectory is positive," Phi observed. "Interstellar trade has increased 23%. Technological exchange programs show promising results. And perhaps most significantly, cultural barriers are eroding without erasing unique heritage." As the conference proceeded, representatives from across the galaxy shared their experiences of the new order. There were complaints about Earth's occasionally heavy-handed security measures, concerns about cultural contamination, and heated debates about resource allocation. But underlying it all was a palpable sense of optimism, a belief that cooperation might prove more advantageous than conquest. When the formal sessions concluded, Hayes found himself alone with Phi in one of the station's observation lounges. Through the transparent walls, they watched ships arriving and departing, a visible manifestation of the increased connectivity between worlds. "I never thanked you properly," Hayes said after a comfortable silence. Phi's bioluminescence registered surprise. "For what, Admiral?" "For inviting Earth to that War Council. For taking a chance on volatile primates with coffee addictions." Phi's skin rippled with amusement. "It was a calculated risk. The Conquered had exhausted conventional options. We needed an unconventional solution." "Still," Hayes pressed, "it must have been difficult to convince the other counselors." "It was," Phi admitted. "But sometimes leadership requires making unpopular decisions." Her bioluminescence shifted to a more serious hue. "May I ask you something, Admiral? Something you've never fully clarified?" "Go ahead." "The Dead Hand System, the stealth fleet, were they real? Or was it all an elaborate bluff?" Hayes smiled slightly, the same enigmatic expression he'd worn during the confrontation with the hegemony. "Does it matter anymore?" Phi considered this, her bioluminescent patterns flowing through thoughtful progressions. "Perhaps not. What began as necessity has evolved into partnership. Whether your deterrent was real or imagined, its effect was to create space for something new to emerge." "And that's what matters in the end," Hayes agreed. "Not how we got here, but what we do with the opportunity." As they stood contemplating the stars, Hayes's communication device chimed. A message from Earth. The first graduates of the Interspecies Officer Exchange Program were ready for deployment. Human military personnel would serve aboard alien vessels, while representatives from 23 species would join Earth's expanding space fleet. "Another milestone," Hayes noted, showing Phi the message. "From observers to partners to family," Phi observed. "An impressive journey for one standard year." Hayes nodded, thinking of the 4 humans who had walked into that council chamber with nothing but coffee and confidence, and changed the course of galactic history. "We're just getting started," he said. Across the galaxy, the Earth Protection Compact continued to grow. Former enemies became allies. Technological barriers fell, Cultural exchanges flourished. The Dravid hegemony, transformed by its encounter with human unpredictability, was cautiously rejoining interstellar society, not as conquerors, but as contributors. And on countless worlds, beings of all descriptions raised containers of a bitter, stimulating beverage called coffee, adapting the human ritual to their own physiologies and cultures. It wasn't the technology or the military deterrent that had truly conquered the galaxy, but something far more powerful: the simple human capacity to fake confidence until it becomes real. The stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the civilizations rising and falling beneath their light. But for this moment in cosmic history, humanity had found its place among them, not through overwhelming force or technological superiority, but through audacity, adaptability, and the willingness to risk everything rather than submit. Earth had arrived on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same.